It's Your Call is continuing our series of retrospective programming, looking at events that happened 50 years ago that continue to influence us today. Our focus this hour, the arrival of the British boy band known as the Beatles. Hello everyone, I'm Lynn Doyle. It's great to have you along. As you know, as a baby boomer, we have experienced the best and the worst of the last 50 years. We've experienced events that shaped the future of our country. There was the I Have a Dream speech by Dr. Martin Luther King. Then there was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Later, the passage of the Civil Rights Act and desegregation of schools with the landmark Brown versus Board of Education case. And let's not forget the arrival of the Beatles on American soil. Yes, it has been 50 years since John, Paul, George, and Ringo arrived, and our musical landscape has never been the same. They started the British invasion, they sparked social controversy, they embraced cultural change, made millions, and then went their separate ways, breaking millions of hearts along the way. Hey, who doesn't still hate Yoko Ono? But even now, they remain an influence 5 decades later. So what was it about them that contributed such longevity? Well, we have an excellent panel to address that, including my old friend, DJ Jerry Blavitt. He is the tri-state area's legendary Geeter with the Heater. He has a memoir that says, You Only Rock Once, in which he recounts his extraordinary 50-plus years in the music business. That book we featured on the show is now out in paperback. You have to get it. Also with us is Denny Somack. He is a producer, a Grammy Award winner. He's an author, and he's a rock historian. His latest book is Get the Lead Out, How Led Zeppelin Became the Biggest Band in the World. Now, we're talking about the Beatles tonight, but we're going to find out about Led Zeppelin as well. I want to thank you guys for being with us. Good to see you. Can you believe 50 years?
No, it
seems like yesterday.
You know,
Yesterday.
Sitting there in my parents' living room, watching it with everybody, because there were only 4 channels then. It just seems like yesterday.
It does, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about why the Beatles had such a huge impact. But first, I want to go live to the telephones because we are joined by our very own Larry Kane. He was the only journalist allowed to travel with the Beatles on that first American concert tour. As a result, he's the author of 3 Beatles books: When They Were Boys, Ticket to Ride, and Lennon Revealed. You also know him as the host of Voice of Reason right here on the Comcast Network. Larry, it's so good of you to join us.
Great to be there. I can't believe it. Lynn, Denny, and Jerry. I mean, what a trifecta.
Absolutely, but you were the one who was with the Fab Four. We may be the trifecta, but you were with them. Did you realize at the time that history was being made?
Absolutely not. I wish I did. I wish I had that kind of crystal ball. But at the time, my father left me, bid me farewell to go on the tour with them. And the first thing he said to me was, "Watch your back, man. They're a menace to society." All the adults thought that they were out of control. Their hair, they treated them with great disdain. And what I saw in person, and I'll just give it to you straight on, girls, mostly girls, pulling out their hair, screaming in a guttural scream like you've never believed, staring at them so much that tears would flow down their eyes. Got letters later from a lot of those kids who said, Mr. Kane, will you tell Ringo Starr to meet me, please, at the Chicago Merchandise Mart at noon on September 17th. Destiny is our calling. It was that was the original thing. When you were a toddler, you were really not quite old enough to really see that, but that was the original thing where they were basically adored. The adoration transitioned within weeks and months and maybe years to an appreciation of this extraordinary music and what the music had accomplished. And finally, the third phase of Beatlemania. First phase was the insanity, what I call the fantasia. The second phase was the appreciation of the music, and the third was the eternity of their music that continues now. And Brian Epstein said to me, Lynn, on the Beatle tour in 1964, he said, "Larry, the Beatles will be listened to by the children of the 21st century." And I thought he was smoking something.
And of course that turned out to be true because it really truly was the first group that went kind of intergenerational, where, like, as you said, the parents and the kids listened to it, and now the grandkids are listening to them.
Absolutely.
All right. Larry, great to have you with us. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your perspective.
See you guys soon. Take care.
Okay. Let's bring our other guest in here. Jer, you were kind of chuckling because while Larry was saying that, people were just adoring the Beatles, particularly female fans, you weren't right from the very beginning, sold on being a fan of the Beatles.
Well, you know, it's very funny because it was about rhythm and blues, about love, and about rock and roll. It was about My Girl by The Temptations, Would I Love You by Smokey Robinson, Twist and Shout by the Isley Brothers, Sherry by the Four Seasons. So when the Beatles hit, to me and for my audience, it was bubblegum. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, wait a second. I want to hold your hand. But I got to tell you, I can understand the impact that they had because it was something brand new that this country had never seen before. And it truly was the beginning of the English invasion.
Right.
And what happened with me is that, and it was sad at the beginning, Denny, which you'll realize, so many of the great American artists, because of the Beatles and the English invasion, got no airplay. Radio back in the day was formatted 40 records. So consequently, it was Herman's Hermits, it was the Beatles, Dave Clark 5, Freddie Mann and the Man from Man, and to me, man, this was not rock and roll.
And yet, it was the fact that they were something different that gave them the appeal.
Yeah, it's like you said a minute ago. The Beatles are the first group to become cross-generational. It didn't happen for Elvis. It didn't happen for Sinatra. It did happen for the Beatles. So
Well, they were European. It was something that, you know, we never saw anything like this. I mean, back in the day, you had Cashbox and Billboard, which gave you the songs that were happening in London, happening all over. This group came into this country, whoa, first time.
So was it the music that impressed the fans, or was it the fact that it was John, Paul, George, and Ringo, that they had a different look, that they didn't have the Elvis Presley look, they didn't have the Isley Brothers look, like they didn't have Motown look, obviously, but was it their appearance that was appealing, and then we caught on to the music, or vice versa?
I think it was also the fact they were self-contained for the first time, because even Elvis and Sinatra had to have someone write the songs, someone arrange, someone to hire the orchestra. The Beatles wrote most of their music, they arranged it, they played their own
But
instruments.
you think those 14-year-old girls knew that, or did they just see those
Well,
haircuts and say,
these
boy, they
kids-
don't look like my brothers or any of the boys in my school?
These kids were cute. I mean, they were really cute. I mean, they were young. And let me tell you something, the older teens were not into them as much as the young kids were.
Right.
And this is also interesting, Denny. Dick Clark played one of their records on Rate the Record, and it bombed. The
Really?
kids voted for something else. You know?
You know, it's funny, I look at these pictures and I think, oh, the same thing you said before, Denny. You're looking at the pictures with the long hair, that kind of the bowl cut, you know, which younger people watching today would never, ever think that was controversial. But oh my gosh, my father said the same thing. Look at that long hair.
Oh, yeah.
Look at these hoodlums. I mean, he thought for sure that they were a terrible influence just because they looked different from
the
what
end
the
of flat
style was
tops.
at the time, right? You know, I mean, we grew up with Johnny Unitas, you know. It's like
Yeah, you're right. You're right, because the kids back then were wearing the Ivy League pants, short haircuts, man. They were the hippies, the jives, the Amazons, the coyotes. These kids came in like Beatles. What is this?
and right.
You have to remember something else, too, which people don't really realize, but we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Beatles in America. The 50th anniversary of the Beatles was really in '62. So by the time they got here, they already had 2 albums out, 4 hit singles, had what Malcolm Gladwell calls the 10,000 hour, because they played all those nights in Hamburg. And they were really, really well polished by the time they got here. They were not, so they know how to handle themselves, which is why they looked so good on the Sullivan Show, because they could have blown it.
And of course, the Sullivan Show at the time was the
the
make
show.
or break, right?
Yeah.
It was.
Look, remember when Elvis was on there? I mean, but you know, also, Lynn, and I think you'll agree, they had sharp management.
Yes.
Brian Epstein.
Invented management.
I mean, great management. And see, that's what happened in this country. Jimmy Soul, the guys that were doing rock and roll, the Chiffons, they were recording artists. They really didn't have management. What they did is they had the record company that was promoting for them. The Beatles were on target with Brian Epstein.
Okay,
Terry's
on that
absolutely
note,
right. They had guidance. And again, by the time Brian Epstein came over, he'd already had 2 years of experience. He was making it up as he went along. Nobody had ever done it before.
Okay, well, on that note, we have to take a quick break, but we want to invite our viewers to be part of the conversation. I know that there are Beatles fans out there. We want to know what you remember about their arrival and their musical impact. We want to know if you were a fan or if you thought that they were just a passing fad. They were never going to last. Well, they did last for more than 50 years. Can you believe it? Tell me your favorite Beatles memory. You can email me directly at lynn@lynndoyle.net. You can also find us on Facebook or follow me on Twitter. I'm at Lynn Doyle TV. We'll be right back. The Fab Four, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. The Beatles, however you refer to them or however you knew them, they certainly made an impact on America from the time they first touched down in February 1964, which was 50 years ago, until today. That's why we're talking about them on this anniversary of sorts. If you want to join in, we'd love to hear from you. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lynn Doyle. This is It's Your Call. And in the last couple of months, we've been looking at anniversaries, 50 years or so, of things that have shaped America. And one of them is the arrival of the Beatles. We're talking about it. We're giving you a chance to join in and tell us what you think. I want to know in this next segment what your favorite Beatles song ever was, if you can pick one. I'm at lynn@lynndoyle.net. Now, before we took the break, we were talking about the impact that they had when they first arrived. Jerry calls that era bubblegum music. He wasn't a fan at the beginning. And not only were you not a fan, but certainly other artists in America didn't appreciate it because they dominated airplay
They got
at the
knocked
time.
out of the box. There were so many great American artists that had one hit, had great songs that were follow-ups, but because radio was playing English, at one time the Beatles had on the charts. How many?
They had the whole top 10. Every
Top 10.
single and the flip
Seriously?
side
Yeah.
in the second week of April 1964.
Has that happened
No.
before or since? I
Never.
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 Never will either.
I mean,
because there's nobody else that could
Nobody else
compare
could do
to
that.
them,
I
or
mean-
we just don't listen to
and
music
you
that way
like
now.
I said, remember, they had a backlog. By the time they got out of here, they had 2 albums. They were on VJ. How many
Yeah.
labels were they on,
Oh,
Jerry?
that's the greatest. You know, there was a label in Philadelphia called Cameo Parkway that could have had the entire catalog. Bernie Lowe said this group will never make it. VJ out of Chicago, Abner picked up one song, okay, and Swan out of Philadelphia,
right.
Bernie Binnick picked up. And Capitol, am I correct in saying this? Capitol did not, EMI did not want to put out songs
No,
first, right?
did not want to put it out.
Amazing. That's how the little guys in the States got it. But it didn't last too long.
So at the beginning, there were some who thought that they might be a one-hit wonder or might have been like a fad, as I said, as we were
Sure,
going to
of
break.
course.
Musically, and this is where your expertise really comes in handy, musically, they were respected by other musicians, and that typically makes a
absolutely.
difference, right,
Absolutely.
in your long-term success.
I mean, I remember having a conversation with Arthur Fiedler, okay? I was on some television show, and during the commercial break, he leaned over to me, and I said, so who do you think's the greatest, and he said, Lennon and McCartney. He said, their stuff's going to be played 100 years from now.
Really?
I was like, I can't believe Arthur Fiedler just told me that.
So after they had their first hits, then they had their seconds, as we're just saying, in '64, they dominated the
Yeah.
top 10. One hit after another after another. In the music industry, what were people saying? What were they thinking? We know what the fans were doing. They were buying and they were listening and going wild.
You know, it's interesting because I said earlier that it was bubblegum at the beginning. And I bet if you check how many people are going to call you and say their favorite song was She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, or I Want to Hold Your Hands, I don't think they're going to say that. I think the later songs, Imagination.
From Revolver on,
that
Rubber
boy,
Soul.
you know.
Hey Jude.
Right, you know, Let It Be. You know, I think they then became very terrific as far as writing songs, and that's when I said, yeah, okay, I could mix this with My Girl or Would I Love You, you know, Imagine, There's No But. Great lyric. As a matter of fact, there was a group called the Capris that re-recorded it. They had a song called There's a Moon Out Tonight. Great harmony version of that.
I have to say, I asked the question on my Facebook page about favorite Beatles song ever, and we are going to share some of your responses later in the show. But just looking, because the results are coming in like this, you're right, it's songs like Let It Be and Hey Jude, not necessarily
the early
ones.
bubblegum.
Yeah, although I Want to Hold Your